as the witch had gone, Aslan said, "We must move from this place at once. It will be wanted for other purposes. We shall encamp tonight at the fords of Baruna." Of course, everyone was dying to ask him how he had arranged matters with the witch, but his face was stern and everyone's ears were still ringing from the sound of his roar, and so nobody dared. After a meal which was taken in the open air on the hilltop, for the sun had got strong by now and had dried the grass, they were busy for a while taking the pavilion down and packing things up. Before 2 o'clock, they were on the march and set off in a northwesterly direction, walking at an easy pace, for they had not far to go. During the first part of the journey, Aslan explained to Peter part of his campaign. "As soon as she has finished her business in these parts," he said, "the witch and her crew will almost certainly fall back to her house and prepare for a siege. You may or may not be able to cut her off and prevent her from reaching it." He then went on to outline 2 plans of battle, one for fighting the witch and her people in the woods, and another for assaulting her castle. And all the time he was advising Peter how to conduct the operations, saying things like, "You must put your centaurs in such and such a place," or "You must post scouts to see that she doesn't do so and so," till at last Peter said, "But you will be there yourself, Aslan. I can give you no promise of that," answered the lion. And he continued giving Peter his instructions. For the last part of the journey, it was Susan and Lucy who saw most of him. He did not talk very much and seemed to them to be sad. It was still afternoon when they came down to a place where the river valley had widened out and the river was broad and shallow. This was the fords of Baruna, and Aslan gave orders to halt on this side of the water, but Peter said, "Wouldn't it be better to camp on the far side, for fear she would try a night attack or anything?" Aslan, who seemed to have been thinking about something else, roused himself with a shake of his magnificent mane and said, "What's that?" And Peter said it all over again. "No," said Aslan in a dull voice, as if it didn't matter. "No, she will not make an attack tonight." And then he sighed deeply, but presently he added, "All the same, it was well thought of. That is how a soldier ought to think, but it really doesn't matter." So they proceeded to pitch their camp. Aslan's mood affected everyone that evening. Peter was feeling uncomfortable too at the idea of fighting the battle on his own. The news that Aslan might not be there had come as a great shock to him. Supper that evening was a quiet meal. Everyone felt different. It had been last night, even this morning. It was as if the good times, having just begun, were already drawing to their end. The feeling affected Susan so much that she couldn't get to sleep when she went off to bed. And after she had lain countless the other sleepers and crept out of the tent. And the light was bright and everything was quite still except for the noise of the river chattering over the stones. Then Susan suddenly caught Lucy's arm and said, "Look." On the far side of the camping ground, just where the trees began, they saw the lion walking slowly away from them into the wood. Without a word, they both followed him. He led them up a steep slope out of the river valley and then suddenly to the left, apparently by the very same route to which they had used that afternoon in coming from the hill of the stone table. On and on he led them, into the darkness, and out into the pale moonlight, getting their feet wet with the heavy dew. They looked somehow different from the Aslan they knew. His tail and his head hung low, and he walked slowly, as if he were very, very tired. Then, when they were crossing a wide open place where there were no shadows for them to hide in, he stopped and looked around. It was no good trying to run away, so they came towards him. When they were closer, he said, "Oh, children, children, why are you following me?" "We couldn't sleep," said Lucy, and then felt sure that she needed to say no more and that Aslan knew all they had been thinking. "Please, may we come with you, wherever you're going?" said Susan. "Well," said Aslan, and seemed to be thinking. Then he said, "I should be glad of company tonight. Yes, you may come, if you will promise to stop when I tell you, and after that, leave me to go on alone." "Oh, thank you, and we will," said the two girls. Forward they went, and one of the girls walked on each side of the lion. But how slowly he walked, and his great royal head drooped so that his nose nearly touched the grass. Presently he stumbled and gave a low moan. "Aslan, dear Aslan, what is wrong? Can't you tell us? Are you ill, dear Aslan?" asked Susan. "No," said Aslan. "I am sad and lonely. Lay your hands on my mane so that I can feel you are there, and let us walk like that." And so the girls did what they would never have dared to do without his permission, but what they had longed to do ever since they first saw him. They buried their cold hands in the beautiful sea of fur and stroked it, and in so doing walked with him. And presently they saw that they were going with him up the slope, hags and incubuses, wraiths, horrors, efforts, sprites, ornkeys, wooses, and tins. In fact, here were all those who were on the witch's side and whom the wolf had summoned at her command. And right in the middle, standing on the table itself, was the witch herself. A howl and a gibber of dismay went up from the creatures when they first saw the great lion pacing towards them, and for a moment the witch herself seemed to be struck with fear. Then she recovered herself and gave a wild, fierce laugh. "The fool," she cried, "the fool has come. Bind him fast." Lucy and Susan held their breaths, waiting for Aslan's roar and his spring upon his enemies, but it never came. 4 hags, grinning and leering, yet also at first hanging back and half afraid of what they had to do, had approached him. "Bind him, I say," said the witch. The hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when they found that he made no resistance at all. The others, evil dwarfs and apes, rushed in to help them, and between them they rolled the huge lion around on his back and tied all his 4 paws together, shouting and cheering as if they had done something brave. Though had the lion chosen one of those paws, could have been the death of them all. But he made no noise, even when the enemies, straining and tugging, pulled the cords so tight that they cut into his flesh. Then they began to drag him towards the stone table. "Stop," said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre and a pair of shears came forward and squatted down by Aslan's head. Snip, snip, snip went the shears, and masses of curling gold began to fall to the ground. Then the ogre stood back, and the children, watching from their hiding place, could see the face of Aslan looking small and so different without his mane. The enemies also saw the difference. "Why, he's only a great cat after all," cried one. "Isn't that what we're afraid of?" said another. Then they surged round Aslan, cheering at him, saying things like, "Buzz, buzz, buzz, poor pussy," and "How many mice have you got today, cat?" and "Would you like a saucer of milk, bosoms?" "How dare they," said Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The brutes, the brutes." For now that the first shock was over, and the shorn face of Aslan looked to her braver and more beautiful and more patient than ever. "Muzzle him," said the witch. And even now, as they worked about his face, putting on the muzzle, one bite from his jaws would have cost 2 or 3 of them their hands. But he never moved. And this seemed strange, and to enrage all the rabble. Everyone was at him now. Those who had been afraid to come near him, even after he was bound, began to find their courage, and for a few minutes the 2 girls could not even see him. So thickly was he surrounded by the whole crowd of creatures, kicking at him, biting him, spitting on him, cheering at him. At last the rabble had had enough of this. They began to drag the bound hush fell on the crowd. 4 hags holding 4 torches stood at the corners of the table. The witch bared her arms as she had bared them in the previous night when it had been Edmund instead of Aslan. Then she began to whet her knife. It looked to the children, when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it, as if the knife were made of stone and not steel, and it was a strange and evil shape. At last she drew nearer. She stood by Aslan's head, her face working and twitching with passion, but his looked up at the sky, still quiet, neither angry nor afraid, but a little sad. Then, just before she gave the blow, she stooped down and said in a quivering voice, "And now, who has won? Fool, did you think that by all this you would save the human traitor? Now I will kill you instead of him, as our pact was, and so the deep magic will be appeased. But when you are dead, what will prevent me from killing him as well? And who will take him out of my hand then? Understand that you have given me Narnia forever, and you have lost your own life, and you have not saved his. In that knowledge, despair and die." The children did not see the actual moment of the killing, but they couldn't bear to look, and they covered their eyes. That's a sad chapter, but whenever there's a sad moment in a story or in life, there's almost always a rainbow or light that comes the next morning, the next page, the next moment. Never despair. Thank you so much for joining me today for today's chapter reading. If you liked this reading, please, if you feel so inclined, tap the like button and subscribe. Then ring that little bell that says all, and you'll be notified of each and every one of my ASMR and vlog posts. Thank you so much again for joining me. I hope that you're ready for sleep now. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Dream of the light. Let your eyes get heavy. I hope that you have the best night's sleep and will join the world refreshed